quick background. Again, not trying to give anybody a hard time. You don't know what you don't know, right? And I'm a career mechanic. Went to Spartan 87 to 89, got my A&P, worked at Intercontinental Jet, Garrett Service Center, MU2s, anything with a Garrett turbine engine on it, biz jets, third jets, whatever. Came up here, was shocked, I tell you, to go to work for Pen Air. Now I'm from Anchorage. I grew up in Spenard. Float planes dripped on my house as they left over the North Pothole and headed toward the ballpark or the coast. And I love float planes. Always wanted to have one at Lake Hood, and now I do. And I'm not quite super happy about that yet, but we'll get there. And anyway, you don't know what you don't know, right? And our industry, as has been mentioned today, has personnel shortages, right? And we don't have enough hangars up here because everything's too expensive. And people aren't paying enough money to get their airplanes fixed and charging enough money to get their airplanes fixed the way that they should be by the rules, much less by it's a $100,000 or more investment of yours, right? So, and I get it, it's a truck, it's transportation for us. This problem is around the country. I have inspected airplanes in probably a dozen states, and I have never found an airplane that was airworthy right out of manual, ever in my entire life. I have always found stuff that was structural or system or definitely paperwork, always paperwork. Never found a weight and balance correct in my entire life. 135, 121, or Part 91, okay? So I'm anal retentive, I get that, but these things keep us alive too, and they cost less in the long run if you spend a little bit in the short run to keep them going, right? So how does a guy like me, a professional mechanic, end up buying an airplane with so many things that need to be fixed before I can sign the annual off? Well, I was on the float wait list for 10 years like everybody, right? And started looking for airplanes, and in 18 to 19, I flew and or did a pre-buy inspection on 4 180s, 2 stints in 108s, PA-12, Tailorcraft F-19. On the low end of the pricing scale, one of those airplanes was worth about a quarter of what we ended up buying the 184. On the high end, one of those 180s was a H model with a pre-oiler and nice hydraulic skis and floats and everything you could possibly want. Of course, it was very heavy, and that person was pretty proud of it, although that airplane was for sale for about $30,000 less than I now have into our 180. And I thought that was too much money at the time, and that's before the prices got ridiculous too. So had I bought that, I'd be more happily married. Still would have needed a partner though, and didn't have one at the time because I own 2 or 1.5 airplanes. So I looked at all these airplanes. There was a lot of junk out there, a lot of stuff I didn't want to take on as a project. Wanted a flying airplane, and started calling friends. Couldn't find anybody that was on the wait list further down that wanted to maybe buy an airplane together. Gave up, had a friend of a friend sell a 205. I knew the gentleman very well, knew the airplane a little bit. It's a good solid airplane, and so I bought the 205 so I could go play in the woods, which I can't do with the rental airplanes. And oh, by the way, I had taken in this very building CFI ground from Mark Madden a few years before, and my writtens were going to expire, and COVID interrupted my plan to go to Phoenix and get my CFI knocked out on a winter break. So I thought I better get going on that. So so I got a 205 I'm making payments on, started flight training for my CFI, which took way more time and money than I thought it would. And then Lake Hood notifies me I got a float slip July 14. So here's the airplane. I'm going to escape out of the PowerPoint and show you some pictures. And so to make it, again, I think I said this at the beginning. You know, not out to get anybody. I don't think of myself as a bad guy, but I might be a bad guy in the IA story who I called the FAA about. But as a IA holder since 1995, director of maintenance for 2 helicopter operations. I take my job as an inspector very seriously, and we put people in those airplanes, and sometimes they die, and sometimes that's our fault as mechanics or inspectors because we didn't do our job right. Sometimes it's our fault as an owner because we know we did things the cheap way or the easy way and didn't take things the way they should have been addressed. Okay, let's see if this works. So, what was I up to that I was too busy to do a really good pull it out of the water pre-buy on this airplane? Well, my 205 was in the throes of this freaking oil filter adapter thing. If you're not familiar with that, I took that on and off 4 times, built all kinds of fixtures to hold it, and it always moved within 2 flight hours. So that was torn apart in the middle of talking with Dr. Dave Schwartz and Tempest about what to do about that, and I ended up giving the thing to Dave to use in his research about getting better gaskets for that thing. But there's a lot of issues with those that they still haven't fixed. I did have a CFI check ride scheduled for like the end of the 3rd week or so, middle of the 4th week in July, and you try to fly the same airplane, the same 172, getting ready for a check ride, and I went into the flight school at Merrill Field one afternoon about 6 days out from my check ride, and I went into the office, and the flight can and the keys for the plane were not there. And I went out on the ramp, and the airplane wasn't there, and I checked the schedule, and that airplane had gone out on a scenic flight like 3 hours before. It was supposed to be back, well over an hour ago, but it wasn't there. So I alerted the flight school to the fact that my plane wasn't there, and we subsequently found out it had run into the mountain over Eagle River and killed the CFI and the student in it. And so that was a little bit of a delay of the game, added stress on my life there. Meanwhile, trying to figure out if anybody in town could take any amount of money to really do a pre-buy on the airplane in late July, which they could not. And so I tried my best in the evening after the day job, after flying, taking a look at things, but just didn't really do a very, very good job of it. I did earn my first $100 bill as a CFI, giving a guy a 205 checkout, and then the circle of life, used that to buy parts for my 205, right? That's how the circle of life works. So that was good. I haven't done enough of that CFI earning, but this is what my 205 was doing when I found out about this 180 to purchase, and it was holding up a friend's hangar, or rather the hangar was holding my airplane up, and I had really a nightmare of a gear overhaul. Thankfully, a friend that stuck with me for the whole thing, and finally got it back together. And then my partner in buying the 180, my very patient, gracious partner, tried to fly the airplane. And with a former inspector, now flight instructor, the two of them could not get the airplane to pass a mag check. And so I left work and ran down to the airplane, and we eventually let the flight instructor go, and my partner and I tried to figure out what was going on, and we had 3 cold cylinders, and the spare plugs that came with the plane that were in the back didn't fit the airplane, and ran over and got 2 plugs from Seaplanes based on what information I had with me at the time, and they were the wrong size, and so we decided, let's take it out of the water. Meanwhile, I barely got the 205 out of my friend's hangar and parked at a rental tie down at Birchwood in time to take this young lady to Italy for 3 weeks to drink wine and be a tourist. And so, of course, I had to go to Lake Como and fly a float plane just to remember what that was like. But eventually got back and put a couple spark plugs in, still wouldn't pass a mag check, took the harnesses off in the process, and almost all the cigarette tips in the spark plugs were corroded, similar to this lowest one on this would be the right mag, I think. A little scuzzy looking compared to these cleaner ones. The other mag, far worse, actually debris all inside the face of the mag there. I cleaned all that up the best I could. I got all new harnesses, all new fine wire plugs, and on my birthday, instead of helping my wife get ready for the post-Italy trip cheese and wine tasting that we invited a bunch of people over for, I was out doing all that stuff and then running this airplane up. And it was really smooth. I didn't put the cowling back on for reasons that I'll show you, but it was cold and I didn't want to get it all the way warmed up. It ran smooth, but it still had the over 5 second long, very dirty, spitty idle cutoff shutdown. And that in part, well, let me go to the videos, stand by. That in part had to do with this issue. Again, this was annualed on July 24th. We bought the airplane August 6th. My partner tried to fly with them a week after that, but I had taken the top cowling off at one point. We never had the bottom cowling off. You couldn't really see that. Those air boxes have 2 supports in the front. The hardware for one was completely missing. Obviously, it flew into the annual and out of the annual, just like that. And I'm going to jump ahead since we're pressed for time, but this is the spinner bulkhead. Now, once we took it out of the water and I realized there was a bunch of stuff to do, I started with a full serial number verification, took the spinner off to get the number off the prop. And I don't have good pictures of this, but the inside of the spinner was really egged out where the prop dome touches the spinner. And there's a little plastic piece that goes on there and you can change the number of spacers. This one had 4 spacers, and they weren't torn up. So at some time in the past, it got more torn up, not just from that plastic, it seemed like. But everything looked okay from the outside, no spinner cracks, no backing plate cracks, but that whole backing plate can move. And the reason that it has strength is it's got 3 pieces riveted together. And every single one of those rivets is close to falling out. All 3 of those pieces of metal can move independently. Okay, now, if you didn't take the spinner off, could you tell that? There's a lot of black rivet tracks. That was cleaned up a little bit. So maybe, like it's not leaking oil, the prop up's not leaking, the crankshaft's not leaking. What are all these gray radial lines everywhere? Well, once you take the spring off, it's pretty obvious. We'll look at some stuff in the back. So hockey stick. Who's had a hockey stick crack in a 180? Anybody? Okay. John knows all about that. So I didn't like the tail on the airplane when I did look at it because there was a lot of movement, a lot more on one side than the other. And it was hard to tell in the water what that was from, but once we found more problems, we just took the floats off of it and set it down on wheels and ultimately got it in the museum restoration hangar. Huh. But this, you can see how much that rivet moves, okay? And you can see the rivet to the left with all that silver stuff around. That rivet's very loose too. But this one was visually able to be clicked in and out and moved around. All 4 rivets closest to the horizontal stab hinge were like that. And once I drilled the head off that rivet and took it out, this is what it looks like. The end, in the pliers is where the manufactured head was on it. But that rivet was bucked at one time. I don't know if I can play that again. And just by being pried apart with the skins and the hockey stick flexing, just sort of smushed the shop head or the bucktail back into an anvil and loosened it up. And I would say a dozen rivets are like that on the tail. Now, if I had been less stressed and taken more time, I could have stood in the water with my hip boots and found all that with the thing at the float slip, but I did not. Okay, I knew it was messed up. We negotiated the price, and that was all good. We lowered the price a little bit. Whoops, should have done that. Should have gone with the up arrow here. Lots of bad stuff going on down just zoom ahead here, sorry. So we go to Italy, we come back, we put the new harness on it, we run it up, still has a wavering RPM at the mag check, even drop both sides, so I think that helped. But pulled it off the floats, got it inside eventually, but just taking the upper and lower cowling off, you know, this is objectively unairworthy, okay? There's a huge chunk of baffle missing. Now, I saw this when I took the top cowling off, but I can change baffle seals, no big deal. But that's ancient, thrashed, totally missing baffle seal, big holes. This baffle piece, by the way, this is a 54-180 that came not with an R engine, but this is an R. No paperwork to document the installation, which is fine, but I don't know where this baffle corner comes from, but it doesn't fit this oil cooler. There's a piece attached to it here that's trying to drill a little hole in the corner of the oil cooler there. So I had to buy a new one of these baffles and all new baffle seals, which are not installed yet because I was too busy rebuilding the tail, which we'll get to. But objectively unairworthy stuff that an owner or a mechanic should know, and nobody should be signing that stuff off. So, you know, the airbox had issues, the dirty idle cutoff had to be about inside the car, right? Not the loose airbox. So what's an aviation monetary unit? Is that $1,000 still? Or with inflation, has that changed? So you give Allsworth's $1,000 and they give you a nice rebuilt car back. I could have rebuilt that car myself as an A&P in my garage or kitchen, but I've investigated accidents where a mechanic rebuilt a car improperly and killed somebody, and I'd just as soon write the check for $1,000. And getting in the hangar was good because, you know, under the ventral, it looked like there was never any paint, or dorsal fin rather. So there was this little corrosion signature everywhere. There might have been a thin coat of white, off-white or gray primer on there from Cessna, but it sure didn't look like it was ever iodined or primed. And I had to clean up a whole bunch of corrosion there. I got all my new access panels put in, you know, another couple AMUs while there. And, oh, here's another good one. This rivet looks really good on the outside. It wasn't all slimy like this one. This one was starting to slime and move. But this rivet looked really tight from the outside. And here's the thing about not taking stuff apart to inspect it. This mechanic allegedly said that he boroscoped this tail to do the hockey stick AD inspection. Now the last thing in that AD says, also check for loose rivets, which he obviously did not do. So maybe he's just inept and didn't sign, you know, didn't follow the instructions or didn't do a good inspection. But he said he boroscoped this to look at it. Now once you take the horizontal stabilizer off, and we're just gonna climb up and look down in between the outer skin and the structure, then you get to see the other end of that rivet, and it's right here. That rivet is only held in with paint. And it has had a really nice life. That has never seen a bucking bar. It has never been harassed or molested in any way. It has just been along for the ride. And but some of its buddies, from the horizontal bulkhead to the aft fuselage bulkhead, these are driven by a flush set because the guy didn't have a big enough set to drive those ginormous rivets. And these are just smashed, peened over, you know, chopped in half, underbucked. Anvil, and these ginormous rivets are in there because this is this inboard stabilizer hinge bracket. The hole that rivet goes through is even more egged out than that rivet could save because all of this stuff has been drilled apart multiple times in this airplane's life, okay? And this little gray slime trail here shows you that horizontal bulkhead under the stabilizer and the rear bulkhead that supports your vertical fin spar, they were moving like this back and forth, which is part of why there's so much fore and aft motion in the horizontal stabilizer. All objectively unairworthy, and you could see that with an inspection mirror after you took the tail cone off the fuselage. So I'm embarrassed for my profession and, you know, pissed off as an IA, and also at myself for buying this airplane in as is condition, but I did that voluntarily and that's on me. But it should not be okay that we have people signing off annuals like this. Now here's a patch that I drilled off, and this little line is where the crack that that patch was trying to save and the stop drill was at. That's on the horizontal bulkhead under the stabilizer, and this thing was just hiding under there when I drilled the patch off. But there, here's the crack. Somebody did stop drill it, okay? My scribe is in the stop drill that it flew in with, but you can see, if we had Dr. Dave Schwartz here, he would talk a lot about this, but this is not just a crack. This has been hammering on itself back and forth. You see, this would normally be a nice smooth radius here, but the material has been hammered out, and there's strange shapes to the edges, and this is undercut. This is like two tectonic plates doing this and this all the time, right? And even this one, if you look at the displacement of the material, this cracked at a rivet hole, but then this thing has been side-loaded so much that it started to twist the crack, right? And so these two edges are offset. So I had to file that straight before I riveted a new repair on there. Again, all visible once the horizontal stab is off. You can probably see that on the borescope. It's objectively unerodied.
You can see that.
Is that one rivet not even covering the whole hole, the bottom one?
Well, these were, I drilled the manufactured head off and popped the patch off, so I didn't knock the rest of the rivet out yet, right? So I don't know how to get back to my thing here. Okay. Well,
How much time was on the airframe?
What is it, 3,500-ish, something like that? Not a lot. Now the airplane had damage history, and it had some significant repairs, and some of those I wasn't real happy with either, but I have no problem with maintenance history. None of that stuff looked like it was working. It was documented more or less, so I was aware of that, but I wasn't aware of all this stuff going on the tail, and some fellow IA had just signed off the tail AD erroneously to be charitable. I don't know how to get my arrow back there, so.
Well, you know that new program you guys have?
Yeah.
Talk to us about, that's why nothing's gonna happen to that mechanic.
Well, we won't talk about that today while I have my non-FA hat on, because I might be unprofessional. Anyway, one of the things that's required of an IA by rule is to wash the airplane. And when I find hardware and dirt and crap like that, big tire apple in there, this is up under the cockpit,
Actually, the rule says he shall thoroughly clean the aircraft. It doesn't, so if you're a female mechanic, you don't have to clean.
Joel is always good for the entertainment value. Most of this in the pilot's, forward of the pilot's door post, the side kick panel there, goes to nothing. I took, I don't remember the exact amount, because I didn't weigh it separately, but I think I took 10 pounds of stuff, just wiring and antennas that were broken or not connected to anything anymore out of the airplane. Again, why give away the useful load? Just take the stuff out, It's rust, how long does it take for that to look like that? Now, in fairness, there's a nice coating, AASF 50 or something on everything, but that's way far gone, and then the rusty piece starts eating into the aluminum, right? It's just not good. And that little bushing just kind of hangs on to the front of the tail spring, and it takes some loads, but in the bigger picture, it's not like a main wheel gearbox. I get that it's not as serious, but here you pull the tail cone off, and you're looking at the skin that comes up to the bottom side of the elevator on the right-hand side. I'm pointing at a rivet there, and one of my fingers gone. You can see this one is Leroy's Pancake House, bucked way too flat. Some of these are not too bad. This hole right here, I still don't know how big of a bolt I'm gonna have to put through that, because there's no rivet that will do that now. That's where those big, ginormous rivets smashed with a flush set were on the inside. But this rivet, clearly is not even contacting the edge of the hole. And then once I drilled the shop head off of it, I could just push the thing out with the punch quite easily. There's no grip or tension on that rivet at all. And it was bucked at one time, but it wasn't bucked very much, and the relative movement between these two parts just smushed that thing back out to skinnier. But you know, eventually you take all of it apart, you drop some more AMUs on the thing, you make repairs, and you start riveting it back together. This is even before I cut my holes there for the different access kits. And you can put your lower jack screw access kit in, which is way nicer to do once you drill all this stuff out, because then you can take it out and realize all the places that you need to shim it, because none of the contours match your airplane on the new manufactured parts. You know, here's more of a real structural repair for that panel. It was getting all beat up here. This is where that little crack was that I was showing you before. I have a heavy structures background, so this stuff doesn't bother me, but it's just really time consuming and depressing, you know, to have to do all this. But you know, it's cool to get the accessories. It's nice to be in a hangar. We loved being in the museum hangar. $50 a day, $8,900 I paid them last year, and I still got kicked out before I was done. But you know, armrest, backseat armrest, screws, chewing into the aluminum. This was all corrosion that I took out, allodyne, painted. You know, that stuff should be kept up with, right? Then you get your repairs riveted back in, and you gotta put in your new horizontal stabilizer hinge brackets. Now, I could not have used the old brackets over again, even if they were pristine, because I put a 40 thousandths doubler on the top of this, so it moved those brackets up, and none of the holes would line up. But it took me 4 sets of brackets, the last set custom made to my own drawings, to have wide enough perimeters to cover all of the oversized rivets and past repairs and migration of holes and everything. So that was another 1.5 AMUs by the time that was done.
Who made that bracket for you?
BVT in Australia. BVT Aviation. They sell them, they sell by part number off the shelf, but I custom spec'd how much material to add all around the edges, and the service was excellent from those guys.
Did you replace a hockey stick on both sides?
No, they were fine. Nothing was riveted together tight enough to crack a hockey stick. The gear castings, I haven't totally looked at them yet. You know, I'll have to get back to you on that. I've been too busy. So here's 3 stacked up. You know, here's my original one, and this is a poor man's overlay, but the first new one, you can't really tell, but it's a little skinnier here than it is down here. So the new part sort of tapered away to the left a little bit too much. They sent me another one. It's actually a different part number with the joggles and bend radiuses in the wrong place that reach way further back, but that one didn't fit anything else. And then the 4th one that they sent finally was based on the standard part with extra edge distance added. So, but this all takes weeks of effort, you know? And so I did get kicked out of the hangar eventually because they wanted to rebuild the Norseman or something important like that in there. And you know, I lived in Fairbanks for 20 years. I've done a lot of work under a parachute with a Herman Nelson. I changed engines on DC-3s outside. I maintained National Guard helicopters for 2 weeks at Fort Greeley, outdoors in the middle of winter. But you know, that's a lot more fun when you're in your 20s. But I did get the space heater all going eventually, and my parachute's still providing good service. But you know, winter happened a lot this year, and my partner and I followed my brilliant plan to put a foundation down and build this nice little shelter, and all I did was barely keep up with snow in December, and then our windstorm took care of that for me. And didn't hurt the airplane, except it broke the ELT antenna off, which was a really nice antenna. There was nothing wrong with it.
You've had it tough.
But, you know, I can stand there now if it's 30 degrees outside and just blow that heater in my general direction, and I'll be back to riveting pretty soon. And also, you know, it just never stops, right? The AMU for the, I bought a, I don't know if I have the picture of it in here. We wanted to do skis, right? So I bought a pair of skis that need to be rebuilt, but I bought an assembly there that the guy assured me was for the first couple of years, 180s with a 7/8 tail stinger, but it was not. And when I went to see him to pick it up, I forgot to take my calipers. And so I gave him the check, and it was fine because I got a good deal on all that, but this bracket, Scott 3400 bracket doesn't fit, so I had to buy the cheaper than getting the whole bush wheel, right? Because we already have kind of a fat tire one on the phone now, but an old Gar Arrow for it, but it just never ends. So long list of things still to do, but the point here is that owners can do better and mechanics sure as hell can do better, right? So I wanted to have a slide for this and I didn't get that far, but there's a book designed for owners called Plane Sense. PLANE space SENSE. You can go to the FAA.gov website and search Plane Sense in quotes. It's an FAA handbook. It's like a 100-page publication. And it talks about your responsibilities. It talks about your relationship with your mechanic. And, you know, I meant to start the show by asking if anybody knew what AIDS was in aviation. You know, aviation-induced divorce syndrome. I don't have that. I have friends that have that, and I've managed to not have that, which is one of the reasons the airplane takes so long, because you still have to stay married if you're into that sort of thing. You know? But if you're not, you know, then you can work all night long and spend all your money on the airplane, but it doesn't work like that for most of us, right? So you know, we do the best we can, but if we all do better together and we don't accept this kind of nonsense that goes on for decades on an airplane, then all of our airplanes will be in better condition, and it truly will be cheaper in the long term for you, and you'll have a better airplane if you decide to sell it. It'll be worth more, and it won't let you down when you're out in the woods doing your fun guy stuff. You know, and I guess that's the point of the presentation. So it's not hard to see a bunch of this stuff. It's also not hard to know things that you then don't share with your mechanic because you don't want to write the check for it. But that is, in my view, the wrong approach, right? You should share everything and have conversations about this is airworthy, this will kill you, we got to fix that. That's cosmetic, let's not worry about that. You can go home and put some spray paint on that yourself, you don't have to pay me, you know. But let's be having more of those kind of conversations and not let stuff get this bad, annual after annual after annual. Okay? Thanks for staying.